Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1963's Madmen of Mandouras, directed by David Bradley. The first time I saw this movie, it was called They Saved Hitler's Brain, and it ran about 30 minutes longer than this version does. Of course, my friend Scotty came up with a copy of the original film and subjected me to it. I thought that if They Saved Hitler's Brain was 30 minutes shorter, it would be 30% less painful to sit through. I have got to stop thinking like that. I was under the impression that the original movie, which you're about to see, couldn't possibly be duller, more idiotic, more insulting to the intelligence, or more projectile vomit-inducing than the second version. Little did I realize. Before I really start complaining, let me give you a rundown of the plot. Professor Coleman, who should have stuck to making camping gear, has invented the only known antidote to the dreaded G-gas, a chemical weapon devised by the Nazis during the waning days of World War II. The film opens with footage of a poor defenseless elephant slowly keeling over from the effects of the gas. I suspect this was really footage of a pachyderm that had taken a tranq dart, losing consciousness, and I hope that's what it really was. I like elephants. Even though they're so big, they seem like really gentle, inoffensive creatures to me, and I don't like seeing them mistreated. Anyway, after a quick rundown on G-gas, including the fact that a small canister would spread 800 square miles depending on the wind and kill everything it came in contact with, we're told an antidote has been created. It's known by the acronym PAM, or Formula D for short. In addition to being an antidote, it will also make pans non-stick and stop nagging coughs. Some Hispanic guy asks to see the professor, but some suspicious-looking fellow shows up and the Hispanic guy beats feet. We're then introduced to Phil Day, the son-in-law of Professor Coleman and an agent with the CID, which is apparently the agency where they assign below-average CIA agents. After Phil departs, the professor finds out that his younger daughter, Suzanne, has been kidnapped and hurriedly leaves. Suzanne is apparently some kind of beatnik. There's a conga drum and a classical guitar prominently displayed in her apartment. The prof finds her boyfriend, David, unconscious on the floor and then gets kidnapped himself. We then meet the prof's older daughter and wife of Phil, Kathy, who at first I thought was Phil's mother, as she's considerably older than he is. They in turn get abducted by Teo, the guy who wanted to speak to the professor earlier. When they stop at a streetlight, another car pulls up and someone in it shoots Teo. We hear the gun go off, no silencer, but Kathy, who's sitting right next to the guy, doesn't know what happened to him when he suddenly slumps over. It looks as if the CID doesn't have quite the resources that the CIA does because they dispose of the body by shoving it into a phone booth. They do this as a couple walks past them, by the way. After rifling the dead guy's wallet, Phil and Kathy head to Mandouras, a country that's apparently in South America, and then the movie, such as it is, starts. I say it's in South America because there are a lot of Panama hats on display and the chief of police wears a white suit, which every chief of police in South America is automatically issued when they take office. Everybody in Mandouras acts suspiciously, from the world's worst pickpocket at the airport to the desk clerk at the hotel, so Phil checks the room they get for bugs. Carlino, the pickpocket, shows up at their hotel room, and Phil manages to almost hold his own, but gets knocked out by his own wife when he magically switches places with Carlino. The latter turns out to be a friend and helpfully explains most of what's gone up to this point. It turns out he's late Teo's brother, and through a flashback, he explains that the Nazis, who are currently running the town, managed to remove the head of Hitler, who he refers to as Mr. H, and stuck it in a tank of cloudy solution, which keeps it alive. All the doctors who participated in the operation are murdered, except for Teo, who was only wounded, and Mr. H's head is taken to South America. It turns out these Nazis are in possession of the G-gas and plan to destroy the world after getting the formula for the antidote from Professor Coleman. Carlino warns them that there's an assassin after them before he leaves, so they go shopping. Seriously, they go shopping. They stop for a bite at the only nightclub in town and find Kathy's slutty younger beatnik sister, Suzanne, who immediately attaches her face to Phil's as his wife watches with amusement. I'm going to skip the rest of the description of this movie since I know that no matter how hard I try to convince you not to stay up to watch this trash, you're going to anyway. I feel compelled to mention two things, however. The waiter at the joint they find Suzanne in is originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and the bartender cleans the glasses and the ashtrays with the same rag. Yum. What I will tell you is that nothing in this movie makes a lick of sense, even after it's explained. Take, for instance, Phil and his wife leaving the dead Teo in a phone booth. They don't even try to find one in an out-of-the-way place. They just pull over on a busy street, drag the guy to the phone booth, rifle his pockets, and leave him there. Teo seems to take after Don in jailbait since he remains standing in the phone booth until the door is open, at which point he falls out. Then there's the fact that Hitler's head can talk in spite of not having lungs to push the air past his vocal cords. On the upside, he doesn't talk much. He yells things like Rausch and Dummkopf, but he usually just sneers and grimaces and leers maniacally. Add to this the fact that when the Nazis are driving around with the head in the back seat of the car, you can see its shoulders when it's not a lousy-looking prop. Then there's the fact that whenever someone is driving at night, it's twilight outside, but when we cut to the inside of the car, it's pitch black outside. Speaking of driving, when the heroes are being chased, their pursuers are usually driving about 20 feet behind them with the headlights on, but no one in the front car notices it back there. I could go on for another 20 minutes ranting about all the rotten things in this movie, but what's the use? It's not like the stupid things in this movie are hard to spot. Believe me, it could be a lot worse. I could be showing the extended version of this movie, They Saved Hitler's Brain. That's a story in itself, and here it is. When Madmen of Mandouras was purchased for television, the distributors realized that they had kind of bought a pig in a poke. They had a movie that was too short to be fitted into the usual 2-hour spot. To remedy this, they clipped 10 minutes off the beginning of the movie and hired a bunch of UCLA students to expand the length of the film by shooting new footage. This was in 1968, although some sources claim it was done in 1972. And it is amazing how much things changed in 5 or 9 scant years. The actress who plays Tony is hideous, and the guys look like they starred in porn films. All the new footage appears at the beginning of the film, and there is absolutely no attempt whatsoever to match the footage in the original movie, other than shooting in black and white. The one attempt at historical accuracy is inaccurate. A picture of Dwight D. Eisenhower on the wall of CID headquarters. Since John F. Kennedy was the president at the time the original was shot, this is a bit jarring, but not as jarring as the characters in the new footage. They all wear late 1960s fashions and have long, for the time, hair. None of them can act either, so at the very least, they got that part right. There are a few references to G-Gas, and Vic and Tony, the male and female CID agents, have a topical argument about women's lib during one of their interminable scenes together. Tony ends up getting shot in a phone booth, continuity, and Vic gets run off the road and killed when the car he's driving turns into a completely different year and different model before hitting a transformer and blowing up. The reason for this switch is because the footage of the crash is actually stock footage from a much better film, 1958's Thunder Road. The bad guys smile with satisfaction, and Madman of Mandouras takes over from there. If you think the original film is unwatchable, the one with the added footage is even worse. Believe me, I've seen it. I actually considered showing that one, but I was a bit torn, wondering just how much you guys would put up with. You can thank my friend Scotty for saving your brain cells, since he hooked me up with the shorter version. Nestor Pavia was born on June 30th, 1905 in Fresno, California. He got into acting while attending the University of California at Berkeley and discovered a natural talent for dialects. This, coupled with his lack of ethnicity in the looks department, made him a natural to play any foreign character that may have been needed and assured him steady work. He appeared in 292 films over the course of his career and surprisingly never became a true star. Constant work is better than fame, however, and he played everything from Spaniards, Greeks, Russians, and Portuguese to Italians, Indians, Arabs, and even African Americans, although that was on the radio. He died of stomach cancer on September 9th, 1966 in Hollywood, California. And that's it for the bios. I looked up everybody in this movie, and none of them had bios that told me much more than where they went to high school and odd jobs they had before they landed in film. For example, Bill Freed, who appears as Mr. H, was listed as having been in 2 movies. The Madman of Mandouras, They Saved Hitler's Brain, and a nudie film called Tonight for Sure. 2 of those movies are, as you already know, the same ones. So what did I think of Madman of Mandouras? If I haven't made it clear yet, let me do so now. It sucked. More than that, I was offended by it. I don't get offended by movies often, and I don't get offended because they're politically incorrect or anything like that. I actually enjoy them more if they're politically incorrect. As my loyal viewers already know, I hate PC-ness with a white-hot passion and go out of my way to destroy it in any way I can. Is this movie non-PC? Well, I suppose you could say that. The characters from Mandouras are lazy, shifty, two-faced stereotypes, although anyone who takes this film seriously enough to get offended by the content should be covered with honey and staked out on an anthill for the crime of being an idiot. What offended me about this movie is the complete disrespect it shows for the audience. I suppose I may be overly sensitive about this myself, considering that no one in their right mind would pay money to see this movie, and the ones who did probably spent the entire running time making out in the front seat of their cars at the drive-in. So right now, sit back, relax, grab your significant other, and prepare to have a 70-minute makeout session as you ignore Madmen of Mandouras, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema. Stick around. After, I got a surprise for you. Welcome back, and congrats at making it through that heap of cinematic excrement. Since we have a few minutes left, like 50 or so, I'm going to show you a short. I know this may not be everybody's cup of tea, but if you sat through Madmen and Mandouras, I don't think, I don't see any complaints on the horizon. Before we start, however, some history. When I was a kid, there was one constant in my life that I remember better than any other: going home from school for lunch and watching Captain Penny's Funhouse. Captain Penny was a character played by Ron Penfound from March 2nd, 1955 through September 4th, 1971. He wore a railroad engineer's outfit, and the set was supposedly a roundhouse. He showed Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons along with the Little Rascals and the Three Stooges. His show was sponsored by Bosco chocolate syrup, and he mixed and drank a big glass of it on every show. The thing most people remember best about him is Captain Penny's law, and I quote, "You can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool Mom. She's pretty nice and she's pretty smart. You listen to Mom and you won't go far wrong." He left out the part about her beating your ass if she caught you lying, but it was a more innocent time. Thinking about this puts me in mind of another local show, which was actually a franchise. Romper Room, hosted by Miss Barbara. I wasn't a big fan of Romper Room myself, although I watched it faithfully to see if Miss Barbara ever saw me in her magic mirror. I didn't hear her call my name out one damn time in all the years I watched it, and I have carried that scar all through my life. I also recall Captain Penny warning us not to try and pull off the stunts the Three Stooges did. Apparently, when the backlog of 190 shorts were released to television by Columbia Pictures, kids watching them started playing Three Stooges, slapping each other and poking each other in the eyes. Mo heard of this, and during their tours around the country, they stopped into the TV stations broadcasting their shorts and would appear on the air, warning children not to poke each other in the eyes and demonstrating how it was done. He would poke the eyebrows lightly, his fingers bent to hide the fact that he didn't hit the eyes, and when he slapped someone, he didn't stiffen his fingers. I remember watching the Stooges with my grandmother, who loved them and would laugh wildly at their antics. My mom always hated them, always referring to them as those idiots, which made Grandma and the rest of us laugh even harder. Mo Howard was born Moses Harry Horwitz on June 19, 1905 in Brooklyn, New York. In May of 1919, he entered the Vitagraph Studios and volunteered to run errands for no pay in order to break into the business. Actor, writer, director Maurice Costello was impressed by this and cast Mo in several shorts and dramas. In 1924, after meeting vaudeville comedian Ted Healy, his brother Samuel, known on screen as Shemp, and violinist Larry Fine joined Healy's act and became his Stooges. Shemp left the act after getting an offer to play Nobby Walsh in the Joe Palooka series and was replaced by Mo's younger brother, Jerome Lester Horowitz, who was nicknamed Curly. Ted Healy was born Ernest Lee Nash on October 1st, 1896 in Kaufman, Texas. He and the Stooges did well on the vaudeville circuit, and when Talking Pictures came in, he moved to Hollywood. His first film with the Stooges, who were at the time called the Racketeers, was 1930's Soup to Nuts, written by cartoonist Rube Goldberg. Healy was a mean drunk, and he didn't treat his Stooges fairly. It's been noted that when Healy was a star making $30,000 a week, he paid his Stooges $100 a week split 3 ways. Mo was always faithful to Healy despite the complaints of the other two, once saying, "When sober, Ted was the essence of refinement. When under the influence, he became a foul-mouthed, vicious character. Liquor had killed his father and uncle and destroyed his sister's life. When Ted was young, I remember that he made a pledge never to touch liquor after having seen the consequences of its effects on his family. The strain of his life in show business got him started, and once he started drinking, he was never able to stop. Ted Healy died from a beating he received outside the Trocadero nightclub in Hollywood on December 21st, 1937. Curly suffered a series of strokes beginning in 1946, which eventually left him incapacitated and unable to work. The first one made a noticeable difference in his performances. His trademark manicness was slowed down considerably, and his eyes took on an odd slanted look. When he was felled by another, his older brother Shemp came back and took his place in the Stooges. A lot of people prefer Curly to Shemp, and while I understand that, I cannot agree with them when they claim Shemp was no good. First of all, he was handed the incredibly thankless task of replacing Curly, and to his credit, he didn't try to imitate his younger brother's character. Shemp had an established character already, and he didn't change it. He was a great comic and could, in the words of their director Del Lord, come up with the damnedest improvisations if they kept the cameras rolling after a take was done. Leonard Maltin, in his excellent book Movie Comedy Teams, observed that when Shemp came in, the shorts department at Columbia was starting its slow decline. Budgets were being cut and the original writers were retired, so plots and sometimes entire sight gags were lifted from earlier shorts and inserted into new shorts. After a while, the shorts featuring Shemp were recycled nearly intact with minor changes. The Stooges also had a stock company of sorts with Bud Jameson, Vernon Dent, Christine McIntyre, the slick Kenneth MacDonald. Ah, Mr. Slip, at last I catch you in your office. Philip Van Zandt and Emil Sitka, who excelled at playing eccentric scientists, rich old men in danger, or cranky antagonists. After Shemp died of a heart attack on November 22, 1955, Moe and Larry were forced by Columbia to play out their contract with a stand-in for Shemp, Joe Palma. This was the fake Shemp I mentioned in an earlier intro. In 1956, comedy veteran Joe Besser joined the Stooges and stayed with them until the Columbia Shorts department was shut down a year later. When the Stooges' contract ran out, they were unemployed, picking up bit parts here and there separately, but steady work was nowhere to be found. They were about to embark on a personal appearance tour, but Besser bowed out since his wife was ill and couldn't travel with them. They were on the verge of breaking up when Screen Gems, the television arm of Columbia Pictures, released a package of 78 shorts to TV, and they were discovered by a whole new generation. Their popularity soared, and they toured the country making personal appearances after taking on a new stooge, burlesque pro Joe DeRita. Columbia saw money to be made again from the Stooges and hired them to appear in a feature film, 1959's Have Rocket Will Travel. They made 7 more movies, either as stars or making guest appearances, and shot wraparound segments for an animated series called The New Three Stooges. In January of 1970, Larry Fine, born Louis Feinberg, suffered a stroke and was forced to retire. Moe considered replacing him with longtime foil Emil Sitka when they were offered the part in an exploitation film called The Jet Set, later released under the title Blazing Stewardesses, but the funding for the project was held up. Larry Fine died on January 24, 1975, and Moe Howard died soon after from lung cancer on May 4, 1975. Since he was a driving force behind the Three Stooges, the act ended with his death. In 2011, the Farrelly brothers, the creative team behind Kingpin and There's Something About Mary, finally released a Three Stooges movie they'd been planning for decades. It was somewhat in the spirit of the old Columbia shorts, only there were too many scatological jokes for me. It was a worthy effort, though. Here are the Three Stooges in 1936's Disorder in the Court. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Good night.